It's a Mailbag Monday. We've got your questions about the promotion of Zach Neto. What is a pitching lab? And is the Jarred Kelenic breakout real? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, editor-in-chief of BravesToday.com, freelance baseball writer and podcaster. Thank you for making this your first listen. Every single day, we're proudly part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And today's episode is made possible by our friends at Ultimate Baseball GM. If you've ever dreamt of becoming an MLB GM and managing your baseball franchise, this is the game for you. To download the game, visit ultimatebaseballgm.com or look it up in the App Store, because our listeners get a 100% free boost to the franchise when you use the promo code Locked On in the game. So, a lot of questions about Zach Neto. Let's just up front acknowledge this was surprising. So, the Los Angeles Angels on Saturday morning announced that they are promoting their 2022 first overall pick, Zach Neto, straight to the majors and installing him as the shortstop. We're going to have a crossover later this week with Locked On Angels. I think that'll be on Tuesday, where we're going to go more in depth as to his 3 games of performance at the end of this series versus Boston. But in the meantime, this is surprising because Zach Neto has a grand total of 44 games in minor league baseball. Not in the upper minors, not this season, 44 games total. So after the draft, he spent a week in high A Tri-City. 200, 355, 400. They felt good about that. They sent him to Double A Rocket City. He finishes out the year there, goes back this year and starts the year there. So his 44 games total in the minors: 322, 408, 529, 8 home runs, 19 extra base hits, 18 walks to 41 strikeouts, and 8 of 10 on stolen bases. This year specifically, they called him up because he had been so hot this year and was just absolutely raking in Rocket City. Through 7 games, small sample size, I know, but 444, 559, 815 slugging, 3 home runs, 4 extra base hits, 6 walks to 8 strikeouts, and 3 for 3 on stolen bases. David Fletcher has not been good at the plate for the Angels. I would dare say David Fletcher has been bad at the plate for the Angels. So that's why they made this move. And we've seen the Angels be aggressive with prospects before. Logan O'Hoppe, he was in Double A last year, got a brief cup of coffee at the end of the year last year, and then boom, in the bigs, starting on opening day. It's worked out so far. Last year, Chase Silseth was the first member of his draft to make the majors. The Angels called him up and he started and he did well for a while and he went back down. Reed Detmers was the second player from his draft, just barely being beat out by Garrett Crochet. And so the Angels are not afraid to take a top prospect and go ahead and advance them quickly, trying to find their true level and seeing if they can get performance from them at the big league level. This makes sense if you're on the Ohtani clock, right? You have to be competitive. It's the last year of contractual control for Shohei Ohtani, and you're trying to win. You can't afford to roll out a terrible offense, David Fletcher, and or the rough defense of Luis Rengifo at shortstop every day. So I get it. And defensively, I think that Neto is going to be fine in the long term. He's a good athlete. He has a plus arm, so he can make the plays in the hole. The hands are good. The footwork's good. The question that I have, and this is partly because I have not seen him play enough in Double A to answer this yet, is he came out of a smaller school in Campbell. I believe they're the Camels, like the Campbell Camels. I'm not sure, but anyway. He comes out of a smaller school in Campbell. He gets 44 games in the minors, 37 of them in Double A, and is now in Major League Baseball. The bit that I was able to see last year, it felt like the internal clock wasn't exactly there yet. As far as understanding, this is how much time I have to make this throw and get the runner at first. it felt like he was lagging behind a little bit. There would be times when he would get a slow roller. He really should be dropping the ball in his pocket, but he'd try to rush a throw that had no chance of beating the runner. But now it could be a throwing error or allow an extra base to either the hitter or somebody else who's on. So, slow roller, a deep shot in the hole that didn't get there as fast as he thought it would, and same situation. He's going to be behind trying to get that runner, and it's doubtful whether or not he'll actually do it. So I'm not 100% sure how long it's going to take that to transition. I think that's going to be the biggest immediate observation defensively, is going to be that. Now, offensively, as of time of recording this, he's only played one of his 3 games in this series. We're going to be talking to, again, our friends from Locked On Angels. That should be tomorrow's show. We will have seen, after the day game on Monday, we'll have seen all 3 of his games and can give you a better idea offensively of how he's performing at the big league level. But the thing to know about Zach Neto is the contact is plus. He's aggressive, but he's good as far as being able to make consistent contact. Good barrel control, good bat speed, things like that. I do worry that there is, despite the swing being geared towards loft, I do worry that there is kind of a natural ceiling as far as the overall power in the profile, at least at first. And so if he comes up and is successful right away, I feel like you're going to see a similarity to Adley Rutschman last year, where, yeah, he can backspin a ball out, but for the most part, he's just drilling doubles from gap to gap. I feel like that's going to be the biggest component of Zach Neto's game that's going to have to develop from year to year. He did strike out 41 times in 44 games last year. You've got a little bit of questions about, can he watch the strikeouts, especially on off speed? He didn't see a ton of really good off speed. So what's going to happen there? But either way, I do feel confident that Zach Neto can make it happen. Interesting note here. We talked about the prospect promotion incentive. My everydayers will remember this. We talked about if you have to be up and get a year of service time, and that if you finish as a finalist for the Rookie of the Year award or later MVP, your team can get draft pick compensation for it. Zach Neto is going, if he's up the entire year, if he's up starting Saturday and does not go back down, he will miss a full year of service time by 2 days. So his team will not be, so the Angels will not be eligible to get a prospect promotion incentive draft pick for a Rookie of the Year finish, for an MVP finish for the next 2 years before he reaches arbitration. He's going to miss it by 2 days. He would have had to been called up on Thursday, and no other prospect that is called up this year will be qualified under the PPI program unless they previously had service time. So if it's a first-time debut, they had to have been up by Thursday for their team to qualify for a PPI pick, and we'll have that full list for you later this week. In just a minute, I have a question about pitching labs. What are they, and how do they work, and how do they make players better? But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Ultimate Pro Baseball GM. It's the coolest game I've played in a long time. What this is you are running a baseball franchise. Every single strategic aspect. You're playing through seasons, you're leading your franchise and your fans to glory as you are trying to build a dynasty and make a name for yourself as a general manager. It is a realistic and challenging kind of simulation, but you do everything. You hire coaches and staff, so you're dealing with not only the strategy of how you want your team to perform. Do you want your pitchers to go for strikeouts or induce weak contact? Do you want your hitters to be contact or power hitters? What kind of base running theories do you have? Do you want to prioritize defense over offense? All of that stuff from coaches and staff. You have to manage the team finances to make sure you can afford to pay those coaches as well as pay the players in free agency. You have to navigate not only their skills and their weaknesses, their costs, whether it's their salary, things like that, but also their personalities, making sure that your personalities mesh in your clubhouse through the course of a season. You have to scout and draft players. So trying to figure out How much investment do I need to have in scouting to get enough correct information to feel good about drafting this player and developing them into a major league piece? You have to manage injuries. How do you move guys up and down from the minors to the majors to account for guys being hurt, your options, and all of that? Very thorough game. Tons of fun. What I love is you can play with your friends. The entire thing, you can play offline, whenever you want to, as much as you want to, and it can sync with your friends, and you guys can have a league together. We have one amongst all the Locked On MLB hosts, and it's tons of fun. So, Locked On MLB Prospects listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise with the promo code Locked On in the game store. Make sure to check it out to download the game. Visit ProBaseballGM.com. If you're on YouTube, scan the code on the screen, or look it up in the App Store. It's ProBaseballGM.com, the ultimate baseball GM app. Start your dynasty today. Okay, while we were recording the first segment, news dropped that Beatty has been called up to the Mets. So very excited there. That may be the shortest reign ever for a prospect of the pod. We talked about that on Friday's show. We named him the new prospect of the pod, and now he has been called up. We'll have to pick a new one. But very excited to see Beatty finally, deservedly, make his way up. Something where 2019 first rounder, and got some brief time last year. Played in about 11 games before he had a broken thumb and missed the rest of the year, or a torn thumb ligament, something like that. But first hit was a home run against the Braves, I believe, and was challenging for the starting job at third base out of spring training. They went with veteran Eduardo Escobar. Escobar has not been great. And so Beatty right now, having finished 9 games in Syracuse, 400, 500, 886 is the slash line. 5 home runs, 7 extra base hits, 7 walks to 9 strikeouts, and 2 of 4 on stolen bases. Like we talked about on Friday, he's gotten better defensively. He's worked a lot over the summer. His arm is plus. He was working on the range and the quickness of the arm action, and it was kind of below average to, seen as below average in the industry. I've got him as average right now as far as defense, with the possibility of being above average. A lot of work there. He did play 11 games in left field as well. So if there is a matchup where they want Eduardo Escobar in there or they don't want Mark Canha in left field, there's an opportunity for Beatty to get called up and to go do that as well. The big thing here is just he absolutely crushes the ball, right? When he hits the ball, it is incredibly hard. His average exit velo last year in the minors was like 92 miles an hour. This year, I believe it's closer to 98 or 99. His 90th percentile last year was 107. I want to say this year it's somewhere like 111 or 112. He absolutely crushes the ball. And so, very, very well-deserved call-up. He needed to be up, and this needed to happen. I'm glad it did. I don't expect him to go back down. He is in a scenario, because he got enough time last year, where he can qualify the Mets for a prospect promotion incentive, because he will have equaled 1 year of service time after this season. So he absolutely will qualify the Mets for this. They can get additional draft pick compensation if he ends up impacting the Rookie of the Year race and or goes on to be National League MVP. As of Sunday afternoon, right after he was called up, so I'm assuming before they've had a chance to update these lines, I may be wrong, FanDuel has Beatty at 6th in the National League for Rookie of the Year odds, plus 1,600. Leading the way, Jordan Walker, Corbin Carroll, and Cody Senga are all tied at plus 500. James Outman is also at plus 500. Spencer Steer at plus 1,400, and then Beatty at plus 1,600. I would imagine that you're probably a couple weeks away from kind of hitting that cutoff where anybody else who debuts is going to have to be head and shoulders significantly better than the rest of the field to catch up and win the award. But Beatty absolutely could be a sleeper pick. You want to go in and drop a little bit on a plus 1,600 right now on FanDuel. I think Beatty could absolutely be a sleeper pick for Rookie of the Year. While we're on the topic of Mets prospects, I had a question. This is supposed to be in the third segment. We're going to shuffle this around a little bit. Jarred Kelenic, of the Seattle Mariners. Drafted in 2018 by the Mets, was part of the Robinson Cano, Edwin Diaz deal, was traded that December to the Mariners. Had the question, is this real or not? Like, is his breakout legitimate? And I think it is. So the story on Jarred Kelenic here, former top prospect. At one point in time, he was the number 2 prospect in this Mariners system, and then struggled very, very significantly. So in 21 and 22, he got a combined 147 games in the big. So just under a full season, but enough where the sample size is significant. 168, 251, 338 slash line, 21 home runs, 41 extra base hits. So the power is there, but your power tool's only as good as your hit tool. 52 walks to 167 strikeouts in 147 games. 11 to 17 on stolen bases. This year so far, so again, 168 batting average. This year so far, through 13 games, about 45, I believe it's 45 at-bats, he is 356, 408, 733. 4 home runs, 9 extra base hits, 4 walks to 15 strikeouts, and 2 for 2 on stolen bases. The reason why I think this Jarred Kelenic breakout is real, as I went in and pulled some of the advanced stuff from 21 and 22 to now. And the biggest improvement that he's made, and the reason why I think it's real, is because he's completely done a 180 on his chase. So during his previous struggles, his chase rate was 36th percentile. So 29.4% of the time, he would expand the zone and go after it, which is above average, not a ton. The MLB average is about 28%. And then when he did that, he was less likely than average to actually make contact when he went out of the zone. And it's because he would chase things that were not realistically able to be hit. He'd get fooled a lot by breaking stuff and things like that. He had a 50% contact rate outside of the zone, where the MLB average was closer to 58%. This year, he, again, smaller sample size, 13 games, but he's in the 75th percentile for chase rate. And the higher is better on percentile. 75th percentile means he's better than 75% of baseball. So you want the percentile to be higher. 75th percentile, 22.8% chase. So he brought it down 7% from above average to well below average. And contact rate, so when he does chase, he's only going after pitches that are closer to the zone that he can make contact on. His contact rate is just below MLB average at 57%. MLB average is 58%. So he got 7% better at making contact out of the zone while chasing 8% of the time less out of the zone. He lowered his chase rate by 8%. He increased his contact rate out of the zone by almost 8%. These are all kind of things that are sticky, that stick. It feels like this is legitimate. Now, do I think he's going to bat 350 the rest of the year? I do not. But do I see him as a guy who can be closer to the minor league slash line than the major league slash line? I do. His career in the minors, and he won't be this high, but his career in the minors, 295, 369, 540. He tore it up in AAA Tacoma last year. 295, 365, 560, 18 home runs, 53 extra base hits. Do I think he'll bat 295 in the bigs? No, but does something like 240, 245 with an on base of mid threes and a slugging in the mid fours, is that realistic? I think that's more realistic than what he did last year, coming back and being the thing that he does. And so it feels like the Jarred Kelenic breakout is finally real. In just a minute, let's finally get to that pitching lab conversation and talk about what exactly a pitching lab is. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at So Rare. I have been enjoying So Rare a lot. It is a fantasy baseball game and marketplace. It transforms fans into owners. You have officially licensed digital cards featuring players from all 30 MLB teams. So it is completely free to join and to play. When you sign up, you you open a pack and select cards. And then from there, you can win additional cards, swapping cards that you have. And the better you perform, the better the cards are that you earn. The way it works is there is 2 game weeks per week, Monday through Thursday and Friday through Sunday. You pick a 7-player team, a starting pitcher, a relief pitcher, a corner infielder, a middle infielder, an outfielder, an extra hitter, which can be any hitter, and a flex, which can be anybody but Shohei Ohtani because he breaks the game. And the idea here is you're competing against other people. You get positive and negative points based on how they perform. And at the end of the game week, which again, Monday through Thursday or Friday through Sunday, the higher you are on the leaderboards, the better rewards you get, up to it including game tickets, merchandise, signed jerseys, VIP experiences, and rare cards that make your team even better. So head to sorare.com/lockedon. That's SORARE.com/lockedon to draft your team of free player cards, set your lineup, and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's sorare.com/lockedon to start playing today. Question that came from our Locked On MLB Prospects Discord, which if you want to join, links in the episode description, links in the show notes. What is a pitching lab? The Brewers have talked about them having a lab and how much it's helped the pitchers. And so what really is that? This is a newer development in baseball. Not every team has a pitching lab, and a lot of teams do not want to talk about what is in the lab or what they're doing in the lab. But the best way to explain, let's talk about what it is and then what you use it for. So what this is, in essence, is you've taken an area like where somebody can throw bullpens. So you've got 2 lanes, 3 lanes, whatever. And you add a lot of technology. It's a specialized area there for throwing your bullpens. One of the big things they'll add is high-speed cameras. The Edgertronic cameras or other manufacturers, that's just the one that I'm familiar with. Useful for a couple different things. One, you can use them to specifically zoom in on the hand at the point of release of the ball, so that you can track not only what the hand and wrist does in slow motion, but how the ball comes off of the hand and why it came off the way it did. You can also use a lot of these cameras for markerless biomechanical tracking. So if you've ever seen somebody throwing a ball or swinging a bat, and it's like the stick wire frame that is doing it, that's a biomechanical tracking. The way that this system works, you used to have to put little dots on your body. So you'd have to be in like nothing but your underwear, put dots on your body and pitch. Now they can do it with just cameras, but it uses a computer to model the actual physics of the body, the exact movements of every limb, of every joint, of every bone as you make these pitches, so that they can understand how your body is moving. There's usually a full TrackMan setup, so you can track the pitch, all of the characteristics you need, release point, angle, movement, horizontal, vertical, all of that. And then there's usually force plates embedded in the mound that can register how hard your impact on the ground was, how well you're doing at transferring weight, and the amount of force you're able to generate when you land. A lot of teams have these at their minor league facilities now, as well as usually somewhere near their ballpark. And then there's private organizations that have these as well. So Driveline is a very famous example of a place that is a pitching lab that has all of this technology. The Wake Forest pitching lab is one of the more famous ones outside of professional baseball. The Wake Forest University has this on the campus, staffed by faculty and students from their programs who do a lot of this stuff, and they take MLB players who want to come in and get checked out. Anthony Volpe was there 2 years ago working on his arm strength. And then there are some individuals who have them. Adam Ottavino, the pitcher, has one that is I think it's in like somewhere in a storefront in New York. It's just like an unlabeled storefront. It used to be a retail store, and they bought it and put all this stuff in. A lot of teams have them. I know Arizona has one at their spring training complex. I know the Dodgers have one. I know Baltimore has one in Baltimore because a lot of their minor league affiliates can come through. But again, a lot of teams don't talk about this. So we know that a couple of them don't. Like we know that Oakland doesn't. I don't think Tampa does, but it feels like a thing that they probably should have. So I could be wrong there. And then Specifically, I think the other part of this is, what are these used for? So there's three main uses for a pitching lab. One of them is what you're thinking about, which is creating pitches or tweaking an arsenal. So you can go and you can figure out how you throw a pitch and the specific interaction of the ball and your hand and your wrist and your arm to figure out, how do I add movement to a pitch? How do I learn a new pitch? Like, let's say I want something that breaks like this to help offset my other pitches, which break this different way. Well, you can look and see, can I adjust one of my existing pitches to break more? Do I need to add something new? That's all a use of the pitching lab. A lot of that would be like off-season stuff. You wouldn't really try to learn a new pitch in the lab during the season. Guys do learn pitches during the season, but you may not be in the lab doing that because of the location of the lab. But what a lot of organizations use them for, two other things you may not have thought about. One of them is maximizing the efficiency of your existing mechanics. So, for instance, they can determine, using the biomechanical assessment, how much lateral movement do you have in your delivery versus coming straight to the plate. My everydayers will remember I had a conversation with Jake Mastriani of Locked On Braves, and we talked about, amongst other guys, AJ Smith-Shawver, prospect in the Braves system, fastball slider guy, and we jokingly called him the Spencer Strider starter kit because he has a lot of similar characteristics to Spencer Strider in that fastball, in that slider. But one of the big differences, if you watch the two pitch, is Spencer Strider, when he finishes the pitch, especially if it's a strike three, he can almost pirouette on his plant foot. He's perfectly balanced vertically, and all of his weight is over his center of gravity. Whereas AJ Smith-Shawver, when he delivers, oftentimes he falls off the mound to the first base side because he still has lateral movement in his delivery. And if you think about it, anything that's not movement towards the plate is taking away potential energy that can go into your pitch. So that's an example of something where you would use a biomechanical lab to maximize the efficiency of existing mechanics. Maybe you want to look at the arm path or release point, whatever. But that's a good example of maximizing the efficiency in your mechanics. The other use would be to maximize health. And often these things go together, but let's say, for instance, you're looking at this guy's considering dropping his arm slot a little bit so that he can get more extension on his fastball, which helps the velocity play up a bit. Using the markerless biomechanical tracking and all of the modeling in the pitching lab, you can figure out what is the elbow torque and what is the shoulder stress from that lower arm slot. Is this something that could lead to injury going forward? Is this something that would be fine with adjustments, or is this something that you should not do? And so maybe it's something where you've determined, okay, there's a little bit of additional shoulder stress with that lower slot. We need to give the guy extra shoulder strength workouts to help strengthen the structure around the rotator cuff in the shoulder so that he doesn't have injury. Maybe using the markerless biomechanics, you notice that his hips aren't quite turning and firing the way that they should. And so he's having to overcompensate with the arm, with brute arm strength, to make up for the hips not firing. Well, rather than risk an oblique injury or a shoulder injury or a pec injury, let's look at doing some hip mobility work to allow those hips to fire so that he doesn't have to put so much of the arm into it. He can use the body and the core to get the pitch out at the velocity he needs it to. So a couple different uses for a pitching lab. Again, one of those areas where not every team is doing this yet, and so the teams that are doing it are rather quiet about what they're used for. I reached out to a few organizations, didn't get a lot of stuff on the record. Most of what I got was things that you can verify through existing articles and things like that. But still, great question, fun thing. And one day we'll get a chance to dive more into this and have more information from some of these teams that do some of these things. If you have questions for the show, I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. You can email us, lockedonmlbprospects@gmail.com, or, like we mentioned earlier, drop your questions in the Locked On MLB Prospects Discord. Links in the episode description, links in the show notes. Tomorrow, we're talking to our guys from the Angels. We want to do a victory lap on Logan O'Hoppe, but also talk about Zach Neto and how he's looking as well as peek at some of these other prospects to watch in the Angels system. See if any of these guys can help them in 2023 as they try to compete in that final year of Shohei's contractual control. But in the meantime, we'll talk to you guys tomorrow. And remember, it's always a great time to pay a minor leaguer.